King of Wrath, it features an interracial romance. So the main character, Vivian, is Chinese American, and the hero, Dante, is Italian American. And I think even though the Twisted series did feature Asian leads, so Ava in Twisted Love was Asian, and so was Josh in Twisted Hate, I think King of Wrath was the first book where I kind of leaned into it, into, for example, the kind of cultural differences that can come into a relationship when you have those two clashing cultures, right? It's like part of the book, and part of Vivian's personal arc is that she has to learn how to stand up for herself and push back against her family, who were the ones that pushed her into this arranged marriage with Dante. Because in Asian culture, the concept of filial piety and listening to your elders and not talking back to your elders is a very, very strong concept, right? Like it was ingrained in us basically from the day that we were born. And that's very different from someone like Dante, who grew up in a culture where I think there was a much more heavy emphasis on individualization. And he gets so frustrated because it's like, why can't, like, you are so strong and like you speak your mind when you're with me. So like, why can't you do the same for your family, right? And I think for that, it was easier for me because I am also Chinese American. So I understand kind of the cultural nuances that come with having family dynamics like that, and then how to deal with it when you're dating with someone outside of your culture. But when I am talking about other books and representing other cultures that I am not a part of, I always try to get input from people who are of that culture. So, for example, Isabella in King of Pride is Filipino Chinese. And then Alessandra in King of Greed is Brazilian. So I always have alpha readers who are of that ethnicity or culture, provide very detailed feedback on the ground, and just making sure that it's authentic and respectful of those cultures. It's fascinating because it's always played like a movie in my mind. Whether I'm reading it or writing it, like I just see it in my mind as it would play out on a screen, and I hear the dialogue as it would as if I were watching a movie. And so I always thought it was how everyone read books, but then it wasn't until I got older where I was like, oh, wow, like people experience words in a much different way than I do. I think they are quite different. King of Pride is also a little bit of a forbidden romance because she is a bartender at the club where he is a member, and they're basically not allowed to fraternize with the members, right? But I think that is actually probably one of the more wholesome stories that I've written, in the sense that, you know, he wasn't morally gray and they just had a very kind of loving, healthy relationship. And then King of Greed was something also totally different because that was a marriage in crisis book. So, and it's different from anything I've ever written because at the beginning of the story, they were already together. They've been married for 10 years. So King of Greed was a story of how, you know, people can grow apart even after being married for so long, even if they actually do love each other, which they did. And then trying to kind of find themselves again after so many years of marriage and kind of losing themselves in work and what things are supposed to be but weren't. And so it's kind of like a second chance as well. And so I think it was easier for me because the dynamics were so different between those two couples. So King of Sloth, it is kind of like grumpy girl, sunshine boy kind of romance, or as they call it now, it's like a black cat, golden retriever kind of dynamic. And so she is Sloan. She is Javier's publicist, and he has always been kind of this like billionaire, like playboy that never really did much with his life. But then there is a family crisis that basically forces him to step up to the plate. And so, and it throws them together because they have to work very closely together. So it's like they find out things about each other, they fall in love, but also it's about him growing into the person he can be, I think, as opposed to the person he has always been. It's interesting because my series are all interconnected, right? So by the time a couple comes into a book, they have already been introduced in previous books. So there's already been little glimpses of them. And when it comes to pairing up couples, I think for me, well, honestly, a lot of it is intuitive. I'm kind of like, oh, this feels like they would be a good match. But for me, I think it's, okay, what type of person do they need in order to help them become a better self, in order to help them grow, right? Sometimes it's an opposite person. So for example, Isabella and Kai, he is so kind of uptight that he like needs to loosen up a little bit. And I can't pair him up with someone that is also uptight because then, wow, like they would not have any fun. Or like sometimes maybe they need someone to match their energy, right? Like Josh and Jules, who are both kind of out there, very outgoing, very fun. And for me, it's about finding a character who is able to accept the other person as they are, but also push them to be better. And so this is why I do a lot of character work before I before I write the story, because I think that's the most important part of a romance. Well, King of Envy is the fifth book in the series, so it comes out next spring. I can't say too much about it, but I am very excited for it because I think it's going back to my roots a little in that the main male character is probably a little more morally gray after a string of heroes that are a little bit more wholesome in King of Pride and King of Greed. And so I think that one will have darker themes as well. And then King of Gluttony, I have not fully plotted that out yet, but that will definitely, like as a foodie, I am very excited for that one. Expect a lot of food descriptions. Who knows? It could make it into one of the spicy scenes. You never know. And then we actually have King of Lust also, which is going to be the seventh book. I'm very excited for the Striker. It is my first ever sports romance, and it comes out this September, and it follows an English Premier League footballer or soccer player, as they call it in the United States. And, you know, football/soccer is the only sport that I enjoy writing. So I am super excited to delve into this world, and it's set in London. So it's my first ever series that is set there. And I can't reveal too much yet because the blurb isn't officially out, but it does follow Asher Donovan, who has already shown up in the Twisted and Kings of Sin series, and he's kind of like the world's greatest footballer, right? But there's more that goes on behind the scenes of that. It'll be a new series. It'll be 3 books, and every book will follow a different player in the Premier League.